Frank Sultana, welcome to Australian Musician.
G'day, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Frank, what's your earliest memories of hearing the blues?
I suppose, very young, four or five, I guess, listening to mum and dad's records. Dad had a pretty healthy collection of sort of mid-50s, 1950s American rhythm and blues, sort of going into rock and roll. So a lot of Chuck Berry, a lot of Little Richard, Joe Lee Lewis, Elvis, mixed with stuff like Roy Orbison and Ray Charles, and yeah, so it was a good healthy mix, I guess, of American rhythm and blues. And then as you get older, I suppose you just go looking for who inspired those guys. It's a really slight tangent to then be listening to Lightning Hopkins and John Lee Hooker and the rest of them. So, and that's kind of how it progressed.
Yeah. So when did you first get a guitar in your hands?
Funnily enough, I was pretty young. I reckon I was 6 or 7, but it didn't last long.
Right.
So I started learning guitar at the school where we were living, and then my parents moved, and one of the things that stopped was the guitar lesson. So I didn't start playing again until I was maybe 17,
Okay.
16, 17. Yeah. But in the meantime, I played alto saxophone in the school band, and then started sort of teaching myself piano at the beginning of year 11 and did piano for my HSC. And so it was kind of like I just kind of dived into learning a bunch of things at the same time.
Yeah. What about blues slide guitarists that you got into?
Um, Funnily enough, I remember coming across slide as a thing years earlier, but not really getting the connection with the open tuning. And so playing slide in standard tuning is a very different sort of animal. And I just kind of tried it and it didn't really feel right. And then I kind of put the slide away for a bunch of years. And then it was only once I started really delving into the whole idea of, open tuning and the rest of it that I took the slide up again. But no one really in particular, man. I'd say Derek Trucks in the modern era is, obviously one of the greats, but no one really in particular. I remember seeing Bonnie Raitt when I was younger play slide and thought that was pretty cool that she was a woman and playing amazing guitar and playing slide and singing the blues. Yeah, so maybe Bonnie.
Yeah. You've had a hell of a year, Frank. You went to Memphis to participate in the International Blues Challenge, and you won the solo duo category. How was the whole experience?
It was amazing. Like, I don't even know where to start. I've been sort of talking about it in bits and pieces since I got back, but the whole thing's been quite surreal. Memphis was just jumping straight into just all this kind of vibe and excitement of the IBC. There were heaps of people there, over 150, 160 people participating in the comp, and then, a few thousand people there to watch it and support it. So it was amazing. And it was my first time in Memphis, first time in the Deep South. And so it was just one day after another of just seeing and hearing and, connecting with just incredible things and incredible people.
How many times did you perform, and was it all original stuff you were playing?
Yeah, so I made the decision to just play original songs. And so, yeah, that's what I did. So we got there. I got there on the Saturday, and then on the Tuesday night, they put on a showcase. And the Australian acts, there were 2 acts from Adelaide and myself and Christina Crofts from Sydney. And so they put on a showcase at a place called the Blues City Cafe. So we did that on the Tuesday, and then the comp started on the Wednesday. We performed Wednesday and Thursday in clubs with judges, and then they added up those scores. If you got through, you got through to the Friday, and then based on that score, you got through to the Saturday to the final. So all up, yeah, 4 times all up to play to actually win it. Yeah.
And what was the actual prize?
There was a bunch of things. So there was some cash. There was a harmonica package, which unfortunately is kind of lost on me. I'm not much of a harmonica player, but it's amazing. It's like 20 harmonicas. Lee Oscar, who's a big sponsor of the event. And then I guess the part that is, I guess, the biggest part of it for me is that connection with the States. They book you into a couple of festivals. So I'm going back in August August, September for a couple of festivals, and I'll be back in February next year for a festival. So that part of it was really great. Some promotion assistance with the touring when you're over there and things like that. So it was a nice sort of package, I suppose. Yeah.
You recorded an album at Sun Studios, The Ghosts of Sun Studios, you called it. Were you feeling the ghosts?
Yeah. It was funny because I'd gone a couple of days earlier on some good advice to sort of go there as a tourist, see it, sort of get wowed by it, soak it all up, and then go back a few days later and actually do the session. So I did that. I mean, and it's pretty hard to not get caught up in the vibe of the place. Like you're literally standing on the spots. There's an X on the floor where Elvis stood, and sort of that's where I sat to do my session, and playing through some really lovely vintage gear, and just that essence of the place. There's photographs of Elvis, Carl Perkins, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee, all over the walls, and they're all kind of watching you, and I got that feeling. Like I remember feeling like, you know, processing it in my mind when I got there, to not be overwhelmed by the moment and to just work, and get it done. Because my intention was, and we succeeded in it, was to do 4 hours and just record as many songs as I could with an acoustic, plugged into an amp with a stomp box and vocals. So it's live in the studio, and we managed to get 12 songs done in 4 hours. So I was stoked with that. And so I was sort of talking to myself, I guess, about not being overwhelmed by it. And it was at that point that I kind of looked around and went, well, they were young guys. They were standing here feeling maybe similar to me about what they were about to do. And so I felt like I kind of shared that vibe of the room. And so that's where the idea of the Ghosts of Sun sort of came to me. And so that's what I've called it, the Ghosts of Sun.
Yeah. One of the next big things that's happening for you is you're playing Bluesfest Melbourne, on the bill with
Byron Bay.
And Byron, yep. So you're on the bill.
Yeah, we're doing both of them. Yep.
You're on the bill with Buddy Guy and Bonnie Raitt and Steve Earle and Lucinda Williams, warming the crowd for the Doobie Brothers in Melbourne. How did you feel when you got that call?
Yeah, it was pretty surreal, man. It literally happened the night of the final. I got an email from Peter sort of saying congratulations, and we'll see you at Bluesfest. So it was pretty surreal. Yeah, all of it's been really overwhelming, like fun and enjoyable, but surreal as well. Like all the support from back home. I was more or less over there on my own, and so all the support was pretty amazing. But to get Bluesfest is just, I don't know, it's a dream come true. Like I've been knocking on that door for a while. I've been working pretty hard, touring pretty hard for the last sort of decade, and just chipping away and putting music out. And so to get a run at Bluesfest is just incredible. To get to play both Melbourne and Byron, even better. So we'll be jet setting around the East Coast on Easter weekend, flying up to Byron, playing a couple of shows, and then flying down to Melbourne on the Friday to play Saturday.
Had you been to Bluesfest as a punter in the past?
Yeah, I've been a couple of times over the years. I remember going in the mid-90s. I was traveling around Australia at the time and happened to be there at that time. That was the first time I went. It would have been probably 95, I think. And then I've gone a couple of times since then. But yeah, look, I'm just, excited to be there as a performer and to just soak it up.
Yeah. Is there anyone in particular you're keen on checking out?
Yeah, look, we've got a good day on the Thursday that we can hang around and watch the acts that are on Thursday. Friday, we'll more or less be playing and kind of getting to the airport to fly to Melbourne. But yeah, Lucinda Williams, Brothers Landreth would be great to see. Yeah, and Steve Earle, probably Steve Earle out of everyone, but yeah, it's pretty amazing, like even Elvis Costello, who's an artist I've never really dived into, but he's always kind of been there through my life, and he's a great artist, and he's performing on the Thursday night too. So it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Recording wise, I think the last extended play you brought out was the live album with the Blues Roulette guys, Ben and Johnny. How far back do you go with those
guys? Around 5 years. Yeah. So I started sort of doing the music full time and earlier that year, and then I got a call from Ben. We had a mutual friend, another muso in Melbourne, and he rang me and invited me to do one of the 20-minute sets that they were doing at Echuca. And so I'd never really done anything like that before, kind of jumped in with them, and we've been doing stuff ever since. So yeah, 5 years, and put out an EP, put out 2 EPs actually. We did one with that was the Kings and Queens with Cass Eager and Christina Crofts and PJ O'Brien. So we've done a couple of recordings and a bunch of tours with Jimmy Hocking, and got to play Port Fairy a couple of weeks ago. We had Fiona Boys, Jimmy and myself playing, which was just awesome. So yeah, love playing with Ben and Johnny and Blues Roulette. It's a good relationship.
Yeah. Tell me about your main guitars that you use.
Well, the main ones at the moment is my 1944 Harmony Archtop, which I've had for about 15, 16 years, and I have used it on and off periodically over that 12 years with the Sinister Kids. I used to play it quite a bit. It sort of got semi-retired a few years ago, and then it's come back out in the last sort of year or two. And a sort of late 60s, early 70s Japanese 335. And yeah, I bought a cool little parlor Gretsch before Christmas that I took with me to the States. A thing called a Jinriki. So yeah, I play a few different things. Got an early 90s Telecaster with a Bigsby that comes out from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you play through? What?
Well, I've got a couple of different things. Since COVID, the amp, I went downstairs to my studio one day very early in the lockdown, and I decided that I was going to spend a lot of time in my studio and just work on things. And I pulled out a Peavey Classic 30 that I hadn't used for a bunch of years, and I bought it as a kind of a backup amp, and it just never got used. And so I've been playing that consistently for the last 2 or 3 years. But I like Vox. I've got an AC10, 15, AC30, and a nice old sort of 1950s PA head through a speaker cab. So yeah, I kind of vary it a bit, but the harmony through the Classic 30 has kind of been the vibe for the last year or two.
Yeah. What about the slides? Some people prefer glass slides, others prefer brass. What do you use?
Brass, a heavy gauge brass. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like when it's light, like glass or ceramic, or even the thin gauge steel, it just I can't explain it. I feel like I connect with it deeper if it's a heavier and brass, and so I feel as though that kind of works for me. Yeah, and I tried glass and I kept dropping them and breaking them, so it just was a brass can't break it. So, but yeah, I like a heavy gauge brass slide.
Yeah. So what's happening for the rest of the year? Any studio recording plans?
Well, funnily enough, I've been sort of sitting on a couple of recordings that I've more or less finished. So I've been working on something for about 2 years, 2 and a bit years now, I guess, with some Sydney musos, and it's kind of like a reinterpretation of some of my songs. And so that's kind of more or less finished now. So probably back end of the year, I figure I'll be touring on the Sun release for the next few months at least into the back end of the year, and then put that out probably, and that'll keep me busy going into next year. But yeah, no plans to record at the moment. I've written a whole bunch of lyrics and ideas from the Memphis trip, but I'm not really in the head. I know, not really feeling like recording them right now. And I think there's something that I'll just continue to work on and do something probably next year with that.
Yeah. Well, Frank, it's been great to chat, and we look forward to seeing you at Bluesfest Byron Bay and Melbourne in just a couple of weeks.
Good on you, Greg. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.